I want to pick Miami as a playoff team this year. I just struggle to do it.
You are Locked On College Football with Spencer McLaughlin, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you all so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in this, the greatest sport on planet Earth. Sport, by the way, in which Deion Sanders will thankfully be coaching this year for the Buffs. Don't believe everything you see on Twitter out there. UCLA should not have high hopes for Nico this year. Kansas State to the Big 12 championship game, maybe. Just maybe. That's all on today's show. First, Alex Dono of Locked On Kansas here to talk about those Hurricanes. And Dono, I do like, I won't say love, but do like Miami's offseason. I like Carson Beck. I like a new defensive staff. That was called for. I like the defensive players that they've brought in. Here are my concerns and why I'd love to say Miami's going to go 11-1, make the ACC title game, and either win it, get the automatic berth, or SMU their way into the playoff as the Mustangs did a season ago. I struggle with trusting Mario Cristobal in some tight spots, which is what it can come down to, what it did come down to a year ago, number one. And number two, in the back of my mind, like DJ Lagway at Florida right now, I have that injury thought like, they brought Carson Beck in because they don't have a high level of confidence of what is behind him. So all your chips are on the table betting on Carson Beck, and that's not a bad guy to bet on, especially in Shannon Dawson's offense. But what is the latest on the injury front there with Carson Beck? Is it not serious? How likely is it he could get dinged up again? Because, boy, if he misses a single game, I mean, I don't think there are that many on this Miami schedule that they could go out and comfortably win.
Well, first and foremost, I completely understand having reservations about Miami being a playoff team because it's been the story of the last 20 years is just underachieving just that little bit, like so close but not quite there. In terms of Carson Beck, I'm really bullish on his health. I mean, that doesn't obviously guarantee he's going to fit the offense like a glove. He's got to prove that. But in terms of, his obviously any quarterback can get injured at any given time. But with his specific elbow issue that he had surgery on, based on everything that I hear, including talking to Carson last week at ACC Media Days, I don't think that elbow is any longer an issue for him. He, as of the past 2.5 months, maybe close to 3 months, has been cleared to throw. And he doesn't have any sort of physical restrictions or limitations on that. He's been going through off-season workouts. Miami is about to start in a day, their first day of training camp. So I'm going to have a chance to actually see him throw footballs in Miami for the first time. But he's been good. And he told me like he has been healthy, like even before he was cleared. I think they were just really, really cautious with the timeline for clearing him because, they didn't want to rush him back. So in that front, I mean, I guess the concern anyone would have about Carson Beck is new program, all new teammates, new offensive scheme, and, not having been fully participating in spring football, he's got to build that chemistry pretty quickly here before Notre Dame on August 31st. But health-wise, I'm not concerned.
Well, that's good to hear, and it eases my mind a little bit. When I went through Miami's schedule, Dono, I landed on 9-3, and I think that probably puts the Canes out of the ACC championship game and probably not into the playoff. And, when you were talking about Miami coming up just short, not quite being there, almost, but not right, you think of the Syracuse game last year. I also think of Penn State, who I perhaps infamously at this point have picked to go 12-0 on this very program with wins against Oregon and Ohio State. And people have their own opinions on that particular front. Zach Sako thinks I know ball. A lot of other people think I'm Charlie and Penn State is Lucy with the football. Like, oh, here we go. Up. Not this time. Penn State's offseason has been so dramatically good in so many ways. And not that I don't like what Miami did, but my difference in trusting Penn State to get over the hump this year compared to Miami is what we have seen this offseason. And Carson Beck, I don't think he, is the guy that was turning the ball over too much last year. I think there's a better version of Carson Beck that we're going to see in this Miami offense. I like that Miami changed defensive coordinators, but they didn't hire Jim Knowles. They don't have the same sort of team coming back that Penn State did from a year ago. They have some. That offensive line should be really good. I'm not worried about the running back situation. Maybe a little more worried about not having Xavier Restrepo there, but is it a big panic? No. The losses I've got on the schedule, a late season one at Virginia Tech, and I hate this schedule for Miami, Dono. It is so weird. I don't know of any other major program that has had a bye, a game against an in-state rival, and then another bye, as if you're recovering from the travel of going all the way to Tallahassee. What like I don't like that. So then you rattle off 7 straight ACC conference games to end the year. I don't care for that one bit. I want to trust them more than Notre Dame because they have a more experienced quarterback, but I trust Marcus Freeman in that spot, and I'm pretty bullish on CJ Carr. So I think they lose to Louisville, who I really like. I think they lose at Virginia Tech. I wouldn't be shocked if they lost at Pitt. I think they could drop one of those at the end of the season. And I think they lose to Notre Dame, and they have another good season, but not the great one Miami's hoping for. How does that land to you?
I'm in the 10-2 range, but 9-3 can obviously happen, and I think it really depends on does Miami either split the Notre Dame and Florida games, which are 2 tough non-conference outings. If they split them, I think 10-2 is a big reality. If they win both of those, I'm thinking probably 11-1. If they lose both of those, I'm thinking 9-3 is the ceiling, because then that would involve only slipping up in one of your ACC games. I'll to what you're saying about the schedule. The whole bye right before Florida State and bye after Florida State's ridiculous. And then the other thing you don't see too often, because I've been covering Miami football for a long time and attending home games. And, typically when you get senior day, which is your final home game, it's either the very last or the second to last regular season game of the year. This year, Miami ends with 2 road games, like you mentioned, on the road at Virginia Tech, which could be a very losable game, especially if they make that a night game. That's going to be a flex situation. Virginia Tech, as we know, is a completely different team at night. That Enter Sandman hits differently when it's like 7:30 p.m. Right? If you play them at noon, 3:30, it's a much more winnable game on the road.
I
the night
fully
games
agree.
Blacksburg, they just hit differently. So that's another one. When you said that, I was thinking, that's a game I could definitely see being a potential loss down the stretch. I think those first 2 non-conference games are so important. I just think psychologically, if you can, at least if you split them, whichever one you lose, I think it's more likely you'd lose to Notre Dame than to Florida for obvious reasons. I just Notre Dame is better football teams, at least slightly, than the Gators are this year. But if you split them and you're very competitive, even in the one that you lose, I think that can go a long way to building Miami's confidence into the regular season. But Miami's issue, and I think this is, I know Cam Ward is no longer a Hurricane, which is obviously a factor, played the most important position. But I strongly feel that the roster top to bottom is more talented than it was last year. I think Ward, bailed Miami out of a few spots where they could have easily been an 8.
A few? Team. Can we say like half of the games?
Yeah. So I think they have much more beyond their quarterback position this year. So some of it's going to depend on how well Carson Beck does. But you talk about the changes to the defense. All this stuff needed to happen. They've got a ton of new defensive backs, highlighted by guys like Xavier Lucas from Wisconsin, Zechariah Poyser, really good safety from Jacksonville State, who came in, Keontae Scott, a good nickel from Auburn. So the defensive backfield should be a lot better. I do think that they upgraded significantly at the defensive coordinator spot, bringing Corey Heatherman from Minnesota. Miami's issues, though, have just been consistency, especially in the conference schedule. And so are they deep enough? And, how many situations are going to be in where, the final 2-minute coaching decisions come into play? And I know Cristobal has been, there were a few of those last year than there were the year before. So I'm seeing some progress, and I know he's got some different protocols with guys in his headsets to try to improve that late game protocol. But, to me, Spencer, I think if I just go strictly based on pure talent and blue chip ratio, I think Miami probably has the most talented roster in the ACC, but there's a reason why almost everybody's picking Clemson to win the conference, because Dabo has proven it so many times. Klubnik comes off a great year, and they've got the highest rate of returning players in the entire country, with 80% of their production coming back from last year. Miami doesn't have that. Miami has a lot more turnover from last year. So it's really going to, it's hard for me. I'm going with 10-2, Spencer, but it's really hard for me to give you a confident prediction, because as we know with Miami, expect the unexpected.
Up, down, up, down, up, down. That's why we love the Hurricanes, because they always provide something. Whether there's been a lot. There's been a lot. I wonder how they can overcome not having the Cam Ward Band-Aid. I mean, the Cal game, the Virginia Tech game at times, he made some incredible plays. The Duke game, they were down in the second half. Boom, what was it, a 30-8 run against a good Duke team? I just wonder with that. So I don't think there's anything wrong with going 9-3 this year for Mario Cristobal. I'm sure every Hurricane fan will agree with that. Alex Dono, Locked on Canes, joining me here. We're going to the Big Ten. UCLA and Nico. Fun story. Not a good football team. First, this episode brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it up with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. It brings the bold grape, ginger, and lime flavor of your favorite golf drink, minus the alcohol, into a quick, energizing shot. Whether you're sinking birdies or just making memories with friends, this one's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Let's be honest. Some days on the course or off it, you need a little extra boost to stay sharp and energize. If you feel that way on the golf course, 5 Hour Energy is what you want to go and get. If you go to 5hourenergy.com today, that's the number 5hourenergy.com, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONGOLF to receive 20% off your first order. The best promo code in the history of this entire network, by far. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is not good on subscription orders. Whether you're meeting up with friends or trying to turn 18 holes into 36, highly recommend, by the way, it's always worth it. Get the energizing boost you need to power through. Order transfusion-flavored 5 Hour Energy shots today. Will I have to don a Nico jersey at the end of the season, or will I be safe in my bet with UCLA fans? Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer of Locked on UCLA is here to discuss the Bruins' record in 2025. Win total, according to our friends at FanDuel, of 5.5. I like the under here, Zach, and not just because of our arrangement, which, Scout's honor, I will adhere to. If UCLA wins 7 or more games in the regular season, I will have to purchase a Nico jersey and wear it on the show for an entire week. I am pretty confident that is not going to happen. Now, you are going to accuse me here. I can just sense it coming through the screen as we're recording. I think you're going to accuse me of having consumed haterade with my record prediction here. This schedule for UCLA is sneaky tough. It is sneaky tough as far as Big Ten schedules go. I don't love off-field distractions. I don't think Nico's a savior. I think he's an upgrade probably from what you had at quarterback last year, but don't love the schedule. I know they finished hot at the end of last season. I have not bought into several teams that did that, such as the Florida Gators, for example, a year ago. I am sorry, Zach. I have UCLA at, wait for it, 4-8 when the season comes to a close. 4-8. You react to that first, and then I will give you my game-by-game prediction.
I feel like you've been talking to Mark Culkin a little bit too much about the 4-8.
No, trust me. That's not happening.
And the big thing is UCLA, for them to get the over in this year, to get to a bowl game, to prove you wrong, to get to that Nico Donning Spencer podcast. We have the UCLA's gonna have to start hot, which isn't necessarily going to be a carryover from last year, especially with so many new players in the fold. That's just how the schedule breaks. For UCLA season, you don't necessarily think like many week 1 games are make or break. But if you want to be like on the overhyped train, you got to win that Utah game week 1. You win that game, there's reason to believe you can go 4-0. Now, I can already sense we're going to go with this, Spencer. You're going to make that a loss because it's Utah at home. You're going to say that Dan Mullen's going to beat them in Las Vegas, or at least you're going
No,
to attempt.
no, because I'm nothing if not consistent. At least that's what I try to be. People say I'm not, but really I am. I always, if it's a game that is close and on the margins, I'm going to err on the side of a staff that has been there already versus a staff that is brand new. That's a big game for UNLV, and I think it's going to be an under-the-radar non-conference battle to watch. Big game for the group of five, and for Dan Mullen, certainly, because if he comes in, beats UCLA year one, boy, expectations in Vegas going to skyrocket to get right back to the Mountain West Championship game. But last year, for one of many examples I could cite here, I liked Notre Dame to beat Texas A&M on the road. Why? Marcus Freeman was in year 3. Mike Elko was in game 1. And that game was on the margins, and it came down to situational football, shock of all shocks, Notre Dame wins. So I think that applies here. So I do not have them losing to UNLV. I didn't go that far into the deep end.
I don't know. All I'll say, though, is UCLA, 5-7 last year, all 5 wins are by 1 score. 5-2 in 1-score games. You could argue about the quality of the competition, who they beat in those 1-score games, but if you deem situational football, that's one thing. Now, taking the next step to get to a bowl game, beat a team you're not supposed to beat, that's what we're trying to see in year 2 for Deshaun Foster, right? Go compete. And you can lose in some of those games, right, that in teams that you're better in, right? When Penn State comes to town, you want to be respectable in that game. When you're going to Indiana or you're going to Ohio State, that's the competitive games you want to see. But a lot of these games are against teams that UCLA were competitive against in certain aspects, especially the last 3 or 4, Nebraska, Washington, USC. As much as UCLA needs to start hot, it's those 3 or 4 games with Ohio State in the middle there. UCLA went 1-2 between Nebraska, Washington, and SC last year. A lot of returning pieces from those games a year ago. The Bruins, if they're going to hit the over, have to go 2-1 of those games when they're 1-2. But obviously, this all comes down to Nico, and a lot comes down to the trenches and the defense.
The 1-score game stat you just listed, a significant reason why I'm kind of like, did they play better football last year? Yeah, they went under. I believe I had them 3-9. They finished 5-7. Like, they overperformed my expectations last year. And if that happens again and they go to a bowl game, that's a successful season. Because I agree, Deshaun Foster getting to a bowl game should be feasible. I just don't have a ton of faith, even with all the Nico drama and whatnot. It could be a really fun story. I can guarantee you it shall be discussed one way or another week 1 on the show. That game against Utah, I think, will be really fun. But I think they lose that one. I think for the first month and a half of the season, UCLA fans are going to be feeling good. What I don't like, Zach, is the back half of the schedule. Because I think they win at UNLV. I think they beat New Mexico. I think they win at Northwestern. I wouldn't sleep
I have a bet. My bet was if they lose to Northwestern, I think I have to dump an ice bucket on my head. That's a Big Ten squad bet. I think that was mine. So
that's a good one. That is a good one. Don't sleep on David Braun and the Wildcats. They've got Preston Stone
2 years ago.
Yep. They pulled back big time, but they should be better at the quarterback position. The rest of the roster, I just don't know. Okay, can we agree Penn State is a loss?
Here's my dream, Spencer. I'm not going to come out and say they're going to beat Penn State. This is the
Good.
dream. The dream is that UCLA goes 4-0, which would be 5 weeks in the season, right? Because you have the bye week, the early bye week in this 2-bye schedule. You get to Penn State and you're on the overhyped machine, right? College football always has the overhyped machine when someone's 4-0. If UCLA is in the overhyped machine, I think they've had a successful start to the season. The overhyped 4-0 team. That would be the dream.
I don't think that's a bad place to be, and then you're trying to find a couple wins to get to a bowl game down the stretch. Michigan State, I like the Spartans enough this year to win that game. I would probably take UCLA there if it were in LA, but it's in East Lansing.
But it's against a quarterback that they have seen with the defensive coordinator who was on staff a couple of years ago against the same coach. So that is something where Big Ten rivals, but not completely unfamiliar territory there, even though it's in East Lansing.
I trust Jonathan Smith more than Deshaun Foster at this point. Maryland at home, I don't have high hopes for the Terrapins. A long cross-country trip, I don't think they get that one done, so that's a UCLA win. Unfortunately for the Bruins, cover your ears. I think that's the last win of the season because, the back half by any metric, Zach, including for those who are watching on YouTube here, my own preseason Big Ten power rankings. There they are. Here are the teams you have got and where they where they land on the schedule. Indiana, I have them 5th. Nebraska, I have them 11th, and they are so capable of going even higher than that. Ohio State, I have them 2nd. Washington, I have them 10th. And then USC, I have them 9th. So, yeah, you missed the Oregon, the Illinois, and the Michigans, but I think the depth in the Big Ten is being overshadowed a bit because I think, of course, my Big Ten preseason power rankings are fairly reasonable. And that you've got Nebraska and USC as low as I have them on the list isn't because I don't like the teams. I think those teams are both going over their win totals this year, and they're both 8-9 win programs.
It feels like your rankings, Spencer, are like a prove it. It's like you can reasonably, like, all right, based on what the expectations are, it's like, all right, this is reasonable. Of course, I'll disagree with the UCLA stuff, but, you know, you gave all the haterade to the West Coast teams anyway, so you threw them all in the bottom half of the Big Ten.
I got Washington.
Yeah, but they're in the bottom. Okay, they're in the bottom half of the Big Ten.
Okay,
right? That's why
let me also qualify this by saying, and when I released them, I said this at the time: 1 through 6 are a clear tier 1 to me. Michigan's kind of bordering tier 1, tier 2. If you took tier 2, teams 7 through 12, Iowa, Minnesota, USC, Washington, Nebraska, Michigan State, if you put them in basically any order, I won't push back. That's the order that I landed on, but I'm not pushing back if you flip Nebraska and USC, if you flip Washington and Iowa. I think that the second tier is so wide open, but I think it's solid. I think
UCLA really wants to prove that they're in that second tier. I can't come on here and say they're in tier 1 at this year. They have to prove it. And put that back up, Spencer, if you can. Yeah. Here's the beauty of that. You know who UCLA plays in your 9 through 12, Spencer? USC, Washington, Nebraska, Michigan State, right?
Yep.
That's the beauty of it. So it's like, that's where I could come in with more optimism, saying that's a bunch of teams UCLA is playing on the back half of the schedule, and only one of those do they have to travel more than 30 minutes, right? More than an hour of LA traffic. So there's not like a lot of Big Ten traveling there. And those are all winnable games. You could see UCLA going 3-1, or you could see them going 0-4 in those games. And that is what's going to make the difference between you wearing a Nico jersey or me sitting here disappointed at 4-8. I don't believe that, but it's that stretch, that clump, where I think they should be in that clump. I could respect it if they're in the bottom, but you clearly had them in tier 3. I think they're in tier 2, having to prove themselves. And I think that's where UCLA wants to be, right? Deshaun Foster said in his Big Ten presser, we want to earn the respect, and this is a chance to earn it. And you have to kind of go tier by tier. And UCLA is trying to leap in that next tier in the Big Ten, and they have a golden opportunity with quite a few games. But I don't disagree that the back half of the schedule is pretty tough if you have a rough end of the season.
It can be. I tell you what, I just look at it this way. If I have to buy that Nico jersey, 7 or more wins, tax write-off.
It might be more expensive at
I'm
that
right.
point, too. It might be
it could be. It could be. I could be costing myself with something there. But it's reflective of how confident I am in this situation. And by the way, if there was one game on the back half UCLA should want to win, it's USC, right?
I mean, they haven't lost at USC since prior to COVID, so since prior to 2020.
Yeah,
so
Lincoln Riley better not lose that football game. Zach Anderson-Yoxsimer, Locked On UCLA. We're hitting our third conference of the day going to the Big 12. Kansas State, Big 12 title game or bust? That's coming up next. Will it be Kansas State back to the Big 12 championship game this year? I'm going to have to be talked out of that. And I have Christian Rao of Locked On Kansas State here. I don't think he's the best guy to talk me out of it necessarily. I'm going through the schedule, getting ready for the show, Christian, and I just didn't see a lot of losses on there. I feel like I need you to give me some Kansas State fan horror stories so that I can be reminded of what they, have failed to accomplish in the past, because I just kept going through and I just kept going, win. You're going to split with those two. Win. There's maybe a lot. Like, I landed 10-2. And depending on where those losses show up at, that may or may not put Kansas State in the Big 12 championship game. But I like them over Iowa State in the first major game of the year on August 23rd. Less than a month away, might I add, which is very exciting. I think they win that. I think they lose to Texas Tech. I think they lose at Utah. And overall, my split games are Texas Tech and Iowa State, who are 2 conference contenders this year. And Kansas State is a conference contender. So I'll take them over 8.5, their win total, according to our friends at FanDuel. I land on 10-2. How do you feel about that?
Well, full caveat here, I guess I should say that is my prediction as well in 10-2. I do have a little bit of losses here, but I am more than okay with rolling up the sleeves here and playing a little bit of devil's advocate. At 10-2, I think that is realistic. And if you are 10-2, meaning 7-2 in the conference, that should be good enough to get you to Arlington. And it would be the first time for Kansas State since 2022 to do so. When you look at some of these other teams that have the potential to make it to Arlington, like for the example, Iowa State and Arizona State, there was a really interesting stat that came up just a
Texas
few days
Tech.
ago.
We're not forgetting Texas Tech on this program.
Correct, but hold on for this narrative here. Iowa State and Arizona State were in the championship game last year. If you take out the Oklahomas and the Texases, who are now in the SEC, only Colorado back in 2004, 2005 are the ones who went back-to-back in the Big 12 championship, at least appearances. Haven't had anybody since then make a back-to-back Big 12 appearance that is not in Oklahoma or Texas. So if you want to continue that narrative, Arizona State, Iowa State out the window. But hey, Iowa State, Kansas State lost to them last year. That is the only team on the schedule that Kansas State lost to last year that is still on the schedule. They also lost to Houston, not on the schedule this year. They lost to BYU, not on the schedule this year. I don't know if I'm helping you out here, but when it comes to the week 0, I will say I think that one's a coin flip, Spencer. I truly do. You think they can get the upper edge? I'm with you. I think Avery Johnson has a lot of weapons. I'm super excited about that offense this year, but I do call that one a coin flip. You think Texas Tech is the game that they lose to go for 2 losses, including Utah. I'm agreeing with you on the Utah side. Don't like that away back-to-back in Stillwater and then in Salt Lake City. Don't really like that whatsoever. If you want to play some horror stories of Kansas State, they're so bad in Stillwater. They're terrible in Stillwater. And you can't tell me that Mike Gundy is going to be 0-9 in the conference again.
No,
I think
he's not.
Opportunity when you can go to towards the end of the season there, and he's battling for potentially getting his 6th win or staying alive to get his 6th win. Once he hits that 7th loss, he might be out the door. So that could be a really scary game for Kansas State.
You know the interesting thing about Farmageddon in week 0 on August 23rd, which is being played in Ireland for reasons nobody fully understands or gets. Oh, I haven't sounded off on this yet. I need to. How about Michigan and Western Michigan playing in Germany next year? Who asked for that? Who benefits? Who thought that was a good idea? Who? What? I rail against scheduling a lot on this program. That might be the dumbest thing. If you're trying, even if I agreed with the premise, which I don't, that you should try to extend college football to Europe. You're going to show that Michigan trouncing Western Michigan? What are you doing? They're 90 minutes apart. I'd rather see Michigan go to Western Michigan's campus and see them try to pull an Appalachian State upset. The dumbest thing. Sorry, let's get back to Kansas State. That's why I brought you on the show. I hadn't sounded off on that complete and utter absurdity. Oh, gosh, it's just drives me insane. So that Kansas State-Iowa State game is going to be our first taste of college football. That's a conference game. Unfortunately for Kansas State, though, at Arizona is not. That's a bottom-tier Big 12 team to me. Maybe Coach Brennan gets them going and has a bit of a resurgence. I'm not optimistic. They lost more guys to the portal. No Tetaroa McMillan. I know Fafita's still there, but the last year was just that was tough. So that doesn't count. That game doesn't do anything for Kansas State other than don't get upset. When you go to Tucson, I've seen crazy things happen. I'm a Pac-12 guy, RIP, my whole life. I've seen crazy things happen in Tucson, so let's not completely disrespect the other Wildcats here. But that Iowa State game, I've got coaches with well-established cultures and program identities. I have got veteran quarterbacks who I maybe have more questions about Avery Johnson than Rocco Becht from a pure passing standpoint. I think that's fair. But do I like Avery Johnson? I do. And I am bullish on that Kansas State run game, man. I think when you've got a guy like Avery Johnson, and I'm blanking on his name, the former guy from Dylan Edwards from Colorado still back there. those are playmakers, man. Normally you lose a guy like DJ Giddens, and I think I don't know if that running game is going to be the same. And I'm not saying you are happy to lose DJ Giddens, but I'm just not as concerned about. I think this is going to be a phenomenal football game, and I think between that, a neutral site, Texas Tech at home, I think that's a split. If you told me they lose to Iowa State by 3 to 10 points and they beat Texas Tech by 3 to 10 points, I can see all of that happening.
Yeah, for some reason, I continue to keep looking at the Baylor game too. I think the Baylor game in Waco just makes me nervous. I know that there's, I'm iffy on Baylor, right? Back and forth, and then there's the TCU aspect of things too. Who knows what Sonny Dykes is going to do? Josh Hoover threw for almost 4,000 yards last year. I have this weird feeling that Sonny Dykes is like in this kind of hot seat-ish, but at the same time, he was also 8-4, just like Kansas State last year. So
big Josh Hoover fan over here.
Yeah, Hoover's great. There's a weird dynamic to TCU in my mind, and you got to play them in the middle of the season. So to me, I think the floor is 8-4 again for Kansas State, but I think the ceiling, it could be as well as 12-0, 11-1, but I do think 10-2 is the number for Kansas State. I go with Baylor and Utah as my losses. I think they can get past Texas Tech. I think they can get past Iowa State as well. It wouldn't shock me if one of those other ones fell and they wound up winning another one. But 10-2 is that number I give you. And for the record, with the whole Germany thing with Michigan, Western Michigan, the only reason I'm excited about Kansas State and Iowa State playing in playing in Dublin is because it's good for the Big 12 brand. I don't understand what it's good for the two Michigan schools.
Is the financial outlook of the Big 12 going to radically change because of fans in Ireland?
No, but I like what Brett Yormark is doing for the brand. Just little small things every now and again. And you're putting a rivalry game on week 0 where nobody else
taking a rivalry game away from campuses.
I agree with that.
I don't like that. You know, like Florida State, Georgia Tech last year, at least, you know, wasn't some big rivalry game or anything like that. That one I guess I could kind of get on board with, but college campuses are great, man. Don't take a game away from students. Don't take a game away from donors and fans. Like I'm not a big fan of that. Well, you did talk me off the ledge of jumping to 11-1. I'm going to close with a quick thought on Baylor. I'm not completely down on Baylor. For those on YouTube, these are my Big 12 preseason power rankings. Like, I have Baylor 5th. And I did that because I can't ignore what happened last season and Sawyer Robertson returns. And I absolutely love the coordinator hire they made. And I love that their quarterback is returning and their head coach is back. I think Baylor's a middle of the conference team. Like, as I look at my rankings, Baylor 5, Utah 6, TCU 7. I might put Baylor down to 7. I wouldn't put them below Houston. Houston's got more to prove. I'm pretty bullish on Houston. But, like, Baylor, I can see it being a tough game for Kansas State. I can. I really can. I don't think that is as difficult of a game as Utah and maybe even Texas Tech at home. But hey, I'm like the number outside of Locked On Texas Tech. This is like the number 1 Texas Tech Red Raiders podcast in America, so that's just the way that it goes. I'm going to once again as well, because I love that you mentioned TCU. Big Josh Hoover fan. If you look up at the end of the your power rankings 1 through 7. I think 1 through 7, honestly, could be in Arlington. Like, that's how deep I think this conference is, and I think there's those 7 teams could be easily in Arlington, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever. I wouldn't be surprised either, and TCU is really interesting, but don't be surprised, everybody, if you look up at the end of the season. Wait, Josh Hoover's the leading passer in the Big 12? Wait, what now? Yeah, just remember, you heard it here first, and Christian Rao, Locked On Kansas State, and I see the world the same way. 10-2 for Kansas State. We shall find out with tiebreakers galore if that's good enough to get into the Big 12 championship game. That'll do it for today. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time, and until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.